Hi, and welcome back to the HE Enable podcast. This is the show all about sharing our experiences of disability, neurodivergence, and long-term health conditions in the UK higher education system. Before we start, you might notice that the show is looking a little bit different this week and with a slightly different name. HE Enabled has basically just been expanded into 2 words. The name is fundamentally the same, but it should help people read it and just make it easier to find. And I spent some time developing a new logo. I think it looks cool. I'm gonna use it. Thanks so much for sticking with me through this. This week, I am actually really excited to introduce our guests. Longtime friends of the show. I hope you've been longtime fans of the show. Olly and Amelia. They are the founders of NeuroHouse, a consultancy built for businesses to see the world through a neurodivergent lens. 2 fellow Oxford people, 2 wonderful humans. It's a pleasure to have you 2 on today. I cannot wait to get started. Hey guys, what's up?
Hi, what a lovely introduction.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you very much for having us. We are a big fan of the show and are excited to be on with you, so thank you.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Please could you just both introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background in higher education?
For sure. Would you like to go first?
No, you start.
Okay, so I started higher education. I started life at the University of St Andrews. I did my undergraduate degree there, and I did a degree in literature, English literature. In all honesty, I didn't engage much with academia the first time round. It wasn't until my mid-30s that I got a late in life diagnosis of ADHD, dyslexia, and traits of autism. Explains a lot. Most of my friends from St Andrews, when I told them, they were like, yeah, well, obviously. And it's like, would have been nice if someone had told me all those years ago. But so when I was at St Andrews, I did everything I could. I was very busy, but doing everything other than studying. Then I came back to university later in life. And it was coming back to university that I got those late in life diagnoses. I came back to Oxford to do a part-time master's in literature and arts. And then that took a couple of years, and then I progressed through to a DPhil in literature and arts. And I am doing my DPhil on the niche, sounds niche, all DPhils are niche. I'm looking at the significance of hands in Tudor portraiture, which I find fascinating. No one's ever really looked at hands in any period of art in any detail. And so the Tudors is an interesting place to start. Kind of my warped logic for coming back to university was that I knew I wanted to read and I can't read. And I had this kind of sense of impotence or kind of frustrated desire to engage with literature or just cerebral thinking, but couldn't, and was coming through Oxford on the train one day and saw the sign saying home of the University of Oxford. And I thought to myself, if there's anyone in the world that will not put up with my BS, it's Oxford. If there's anyone that's going to make me read, it's Oxford professors. And so through some sort of sadistic way of thinking, I came back to university to put my brain in gear. It was only then that I got the late in life diagnosis. And I mean, it's still hard, but, that kind of informed a lot. But anyway, so long story short, that's the journey that I've been on. I'm still partway through my DPhil, and I love it and find it extraordinarily hard and frustrating in equal measure.
Out of curiosity, before we move on to Amelia, are you part-time with your DPhil right now? Okay, cool. Yeah. I'll allude to this now, but if you're running a consultancy while also doing a full-time DPhil, I wouldn't envy you, no.
Yeah, no. That would be way too intense. I mean, running a consultancy and doing a part-time DPhil itself is pretty overwhelming. But then at the same time, I've got a brain that needs to be busy, and so kind of if I'm not busy, I'll do. I mean, literally nothing for days. But if I'm crazy busy, I can do a week's worth of work in a day. And so I would rather be super busy. But it's just quite hard to stay on top of.
That is very fair. Amelia, we're going to go to you. Hello.
So my background in higher education is I had a bit of a kind of complicated way into undergrad. I studied classics and I actually applied I can't say this here, but I'm going to. I actually applied to Cambridge first.
Oh no!
I know. And I got an offer, but then missed the grade by like whatever it was, a star or whatever, on results day. And so ended up actually going to St Andrews very briefly. Not at the same time as you, and then only stayed there for a few weeks before I decided actually I was going to take some time out. And then on that year out, I then applied to Oxford and then got in there and then came to do classics there for undergrad. So that's my higher education, and have kind of toyed with going back and doing a master's, but maybe something yet to come that I'll do later on.
At Oxford?
Potentially. We'll see. It depends on the course, I suppose.
And how long we're here for.
True. So yeah.
Yeah, you guys travel a lot for work. It's
yeah.
Right. Next question. Olly, you've kind of alluded to this already, actually, but if you're comfortable saying, how did your neurodivergence disabilities impact your experience of higher education?
Yes, thank you. It's an important and a big question for anyone in, who is neurodivergent and who is studying at any level. It's been interesting because with the awareness of my own neurodivergence has been both a blessing and a curse. Let's focus on the blessing first. The blessing is that I'm much kinder to myself. I allow myself to work within there are certain days I know my brain is on, and those are the days I write. And there are certain days I know my brain is not on, and those are days I don't write. Pre-diagnosis, any understanding of the implications of my combined neurotypes, I would have just got frustrated with myself. And ultimately the output would have been either terrible or non-existent anyway. And so that's good. The journey itself was kind of both like joyful and overwhelming, which is now sitting somewhere between the blessing and the curse, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think when I came to do the masters, I'd literally just got the diagnosis. And I, at that time, had tried, we can talk about medication, I'm sure, at some point, but I had tried some ADHD medication, which at the time was effective. And it was just so strange to sit in a lecture, my first lecture at Oxford, in a seminar, actually, for an hour. And I could focus on what the lecturer was saying. I mean, it seems like it is something that a lot of people would take for granted, but for me it was kind of novel, and that came through both self-awareness, as in I knew that focus was something which I had in the past struggled with. Being aware that I had ADHD, I guess, helped me to self-regulate a little more and to therefore find focus, and I think medication also played a part. Anyway, whatever was going on, I managed to pay attention for an hour in a seminar, and I walked out and burst into floods of tears. Yeah, and all my classmates were like, "Are you okay? Like, what's wrong? What's wrong?" I was like, "No, I'm really happy." And they were like, "What?" I was so confused. And, it was extraordinary for me to kind of be able to engage my brain. That leads to some, I'd say, grief in a way, which is that you then grieve for all of the years that you hadn't been able to do that. And that's fine. I think grieving is important when you go through a neurodivergent diagnosis, because it allows you to process, the times that life is still obviously challenging, but it allows you to revisit your life before that, grieve the times that you had challenges and you had no awareness or help, but to then look forward to years of being aware and having support. And so then moving through kind of higher education from there with those diagnoses, like there's a lot to process. So if I'm honest, when I came to do my master's at Oxford, I was essentially starting my undergraduate. I went to 3 lectures in 4 years as an undergraduate. Not that it's a competition, but I won that competition. I didn't read any of the set texts. When I sat exams at St Andrews, I wrote what I assumed the author had written about the subject.
I find that incredible that you managed to do that. That just absolutely astounds me that you managed to do exams on something you'd never read.
I think a lot of ADHD people could do that. I don't know, but I'd be interested to know from you or from people listening, but the ability to what you perceive is that you're blagging it. It's a bit unkind, you feel at the time like you're blagging it. I mean, to an extent I was, because I hadn't read the book, but like kind of I just didn't engage. I literally couldn't read. Like I had no choice but to sit in the exam. God only knows how I even got to the exam, and found myself in there. I mean, I did some silly things as an undergraduate. I convinced myself once that one of my best friends, Katie, was racing me in the exam, because there's a time that like if you finish 15 minutes before the end, you can leave, and if you don't, you have to stay. I don't know if it's the same at Oxford undergrad.
I don't think.
And I don't know, but either way, I looked over at Katie on the table next to me, and she was writing away furiously, and she kind of caught my eye and carried on writing furiously, and I was like, aha, it's a game, like it's a competition, like let's go. And so I was racing Katie to finish first, and then like kind of marched out of the exam hall like, yeah, beat Katie. And I was like, oh, no, it wasn't a race. And like, why would you race to finish an exam? You should like do it the best you can, right? To spend as much time as possible. Anyway, I was all over the shop. And yeah, I'd answer it based on what I assumed the author had written about what the title was, and did enough to be able to construct an argument. And I probably won points for original thought, because of course it's original thought. Anyway, whatever. I don't want to go too off topic, but there was a lot of time not spent engaging with academia. And so to then go from having barely been to a lecture, never read a set text, to then starting a master's at Oxford, I was literally like, how do I write a humanities essay? I've never really learned how to write a humanities essay, let alone to Oxford standards. And so it was a very, very steep learning curve. I sought help, and the lady who was the director of the course was absolutely incredible and couldn't have been more supportive, and went way beyond the call of duty. And kind of, she was never my specific tutor for an essay, but she did tutes with me every week, and she was absolutely incredible. And so to be able to go from, not knowing how to write a humanities essay, first essay I wrote, I got a meager 2-1. And then after that, I got distinction for every essay, and then a distinction for the masters, and then a scholarship to progress to the DPhil. And I think it kind of shows that, I never imagined that I would ever do a master's at Oxford, let alone a DPhil at Oxford. And I think all this really goes to show, and I hope is relevant to people listening, is that if you have not even the right support, just some support, like hopefully enough support, ideally the right support, but we'll come on to talk about the fact that that's quite hard to find.
Yep.
But if you can find somebody who will invest in you, and somebody who understands you, and somebody who supports you, it can make a huge difference. And that professor made that difference for me, and shows that when you do have a diagnosis and you do have support, that you can go on a hell of a journey. And that there's a lot of cognitive capability which just is yet to be unlocked. And that's kind of been the journey for me, but with some frustrations along the way that we maybe talk about in the context of another question. And I need to probably stop hogging the mic.
I think you have what I can only describe as a quintessentially interest-based nervous system. And I think that your interest is now academia, especially after you put yourself through that rigor at Oxford, has probably served you very well in terms of academia. And that's so impressive. As someone who has a literature degree, half of one, joint honours, and didn't have my ADHD diagnosis till third year, I have no idea how you blagged it that well. That's genuinely impressive. The only thing I did was like, there's 2 versions of Frankenstein. I'd read the older version years ago, reminded myself of the plot, and just compared the other version. Did not read the text that week. And that is the closest I ever got. They were like, wow, you know so much. It's like, thanks, I read SparkNotes.
I mean, SparkNotes, honestly, thank the Lord for SparkNotes.
Honestly.
I don't know if SparkNotes is still a thing, is it? It definitely was.
Yeah.
You got ChatGPT now.
You got ChatGPT. Yeah, I've got a 2-1 from St Andrews in English literature and a first in SparkNotes. Yeah, thanks to them. Anyway, so yes, thank you. And I think the ability to approach things dynamically is like a great ADHD strength, actually.
Yeah.
And like, as much as I kind of jest about, or not even jest, report on those experiences, it was ADHD strengths that got me through that. It wasn't ADHD challenges that meant that I failed. It was ADHD strengths that worked a way through a system to ultimately graduate with a 2-1. And others might find challenges in their environment and not be able to complete their course, or not necessarily attain at any particular level that you'd put on your CV. And that is a problem. I'm sure that's what we'll talk about now.
Yeah. So I just want to quickly hop over to Amelia. So if you're comfortable saying, how did your neurodivergence disabilities impact your experience of higher education?
So I guess, similarly, I didn't know I was neurodivergent until 4th year, literally just before finals.
Oh, wow.
So I'm one of 5 children, and all the other 4 had diagnoses of dyslexia, and a couple of them of ADHD or autism. But I was never kind of looked at, probably being a girl, and also kind of coping pretty well at school or finding ways to mask. And so it was only in 4th year, and fortunately my college helped actually pay for some of part of the diagnosis, which was great. And that meant that I could, access some medication and things just before finals. But I do think kind of even in the process of getting to higher education, I was being impacted, and I just had no idea about it, or how. I think I blamed myself a lot. It resonates a lot with what Olly was saying about how you can be so self-critical. And I think that was the case. I didn't have much confidence in myself, and I was really self-critical and drove myself pretty hard. And so it was kind of quite difficult when I didn't get the grades for Cambridge, and then kind of had to rethink the plan. And then obviously did get into Oxford, but kind of always again felt like I was blagging it, much like you've said. And I think that's a part of my neurodiversity, is kind of never feeling quite that I'm capable, or not really being able to rely perhaps on what I'm capable at, or kind of questioning myself a lot. And so I think that played quite a big part in kind of getting into higher education. And then, during my degree, feeling like everyone else here knows far more than I do, and I'm scrabbling to get by on my 2 essays a week, and not knowing kind of how to survive. Especially also I had a bit of difficulty because I chose classics, because I didn't want to pick a subject that only had one thing. I loved that classics had so many different areas of philosophy and archaeology, and I didn't really have to pick. But that meant that I obviously had to do Latin and Greek, and I'd only been taught Latin once every 2 weeks at my school, which is just a local state school. And so I didn't really have much of a grounding in it. And I taught myself ancient Greek. So up until the point of starting, I felt miles behind my classmates. And so I think that, combined with the neurodivergent aspect of kind of doubting myself a lot, meant that it was actually really hard to kind of get through the degree. There were lots of strengths, I'm sure, but I think those are the real challenges I found.
Yeah, it's also did you not do, was it Latin and Greek ab initio?
Yeah, so what I did was called 1B, where because I'd done A-level Latin, even though I'd done it on less classes, as it were, at school, I got through to doing the A-level, and then I taught myself ancient Greek to GCSE. So I technically had the qualifications, which meant that I was on the 1B course, where you're taken in it as though you, like any other student who's done it to A-level, but kind of didn't take into the account that I didn't really know Latin that well at all.
Oh my goodness.
Really, it was they're both from scratch. So it's just a matter of the way that what course I was on meant that I was kind of put into a category that felt a bit more senior or expert level to what I really was.
And what I will say very quickly as proud husband is that Amelia, and this in part related to then getting a diagnosis in your 4th year, is that having come into a course which is predominantly filled with people who've been studying Latin and Greek since they were 8 years old at private school, Amelia came in self-taught, did 4 years undiagnosed ADHD and autistic, and then did her dissertation and won the prize for the top dissertation in anyone sitting any classics related subject at the university.
Yeah.
So like the most extraordinary achievement, and kind of shows you that the sky's the limit once you kind of have the opportunity to flex your brain.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. And knowing what you're like, by that point, I'd started to actually know what I was capable of doing if I, like Olly said, knew how to work with my brain versus against it. And I think doing that thesis was like a really important moment for that, of realizing actually I can do it my way. And then the validation of that prize at the end was like amazing, that process.
Congratulations. I didn't know that. And I want to say is that with the highest praise, it reminds me a lot of like child skateboard prodigies who like teach themselves on YouTube and then go on to like win the Olympics. That's what
That's a cool reference.
Yeah.
I love that reference. Yeah. Thank you.
Exactly what it reminds me of. So, Olly, I'm going to start with you on this one because I feel like you have stuff to say. Did you encounter any obstacles during your experience of higher education? Did you overcome them? And if so, how?
Yes, I did. I'm yet to meet a neurodivergent student that hasn't. And we set up at Oxford a community of neurodivergent students, and have had the opportunity to meet and speak to a number who have kind of shared very similar experiences. And it's scary how common it is for students at any university to face challenges. Those challenges include, for example, first master's essay submitted, along with a form that should say Olly has the following: dyslexia, ADHD, traits of autism, these are the implications, mark accordingly. Yep. What the professor actually was handed, and I believe still is a form that says Olly has learning difficulties, which may include, and then lists just a handful of kind of generic things. Yeah, and please mark accordingly. And then, all of the feedback on that essay was things like, paragraph structure, sentence structure. And it's like, yeah, I'm dyslexic. I'm going to struggle with that. Let's judge the content and not be marked down on things that my disability fundamentally struggles with. And so that was problematic for me. Now, obviously, as I say, I kind of started to learn the game that I was playing. I've had challenges along the way in terms of applying for disability student support funding, the form then getting lost somewhere between the university and wherever, and then 2 terms later, we never got your form, and all this stuff, and everyone will be able to relate to this. And so I've gone through periods in higher education where I've gone literally years without any of the support that I require. And I faced challenges with internal administration when it comes to all of the boring but important stuff, but where in order to be loaded onto whatever part of a course it is, there's a form which is embedded in paragraph 3 of an email that if you've got ADHD, you're never going to read. And then you lose out because you never filled in the form. And then you try to say, that's not very accessible to me. It would be like the form being on the first floor for somebody who is in a wheelchair and there's no lift. And then the response is a totally blank one. Like, what are you talking about? You should just read your emails and fill in the form. And then there's like this tension where you're like, look, I'm trying to explain what my disability is and what I therefore struggle with.
Trying to advocate for yourself.
Which is difficult if you're neurodivergent, and often experiencing responses which would indicate that those individuals don't have a true understanding of how it impacts you. And I can relate to anybody who's listening that has faced an uphill challenge. I think we as a community are growing in terms of our own awareness of being neurodivergent. Diagnosis rates are going through the roof at the moment. And awareness and understanding of our community beyond is starting to grow, but we've got a long road to go down. And I think education at large should be leading that, but unfortunately isn't.
It's like the mysteriously disappearing student support plans or DSA applications. it's always the little things or just things that could be communicated better. I think I might just take this moment actually to plug, if you're interested in these kind of barriers and the implications of policy, I'm doing the podcast for the 2025 annual student survey with Disabled Students UK. That's coming out next week, so that's going to be the next episode. But yeah, I was reading through the paper today. I obviously can't say much because it's embargoed, but I hope it improves. I hope this whole situation improves. I know that you've had obstacles. I've had support plans go missing. Amelia, we're about to get to you as well. And I also will touch on the consultancy work that you do, because I know that it's probably based off the back of these experiences.
A lot of it, yeah.
It's amazing how you're turning it into like a productive good. I'm really, really excited to chat about it, because I know you got flown out to Disneyland and stuff. It's wild. I'm excited to chat about that in a second. But in the meantime, Amelia, did you have any obstacles during your time at uni?
I think mine have been like a mixture of kind of my own like personal issues with like how to cope in a system that is not wired for neurodivergent minds. I think more than like the administrative issues. So I think that was probably more where the challenges that I faced were less than so much the system. I mean, to a degree. Yeah.
So an example might be when you were doing your exams and you would interpret the exam title in quite a literal way, and you could really have done with support in terms of, when someone sets a title, what are they actually looking for?
This is a really good point, actually. And I think the main reason as to why I didn't get the grades the first time round was in part that I'd never actually been taught really how to read questions. So I'm very literal. And before my exams, I actually remember sitting in the room, like upstairs with you, and getting Olly to like reinterpret the questions of like past exam papers as to like what they were actually looking for, because I would interpret them entirely differently to how the answer that they were looking for.
Do you like academically masking, kind of?
That is a good way of putting it, I suppose. I don't know. It was like that I just definitely did not understand how it was really meant to be addressed. And therefore that's why I guess I was getting it wrong. I think I tend to also overcomplicate things in my mind. And perhaps that's also what I would try to do, is overcomplicate the question rather than take it at face value of what it was actually asking.
And I feel like it's in academia, it can get to the point where you don't know if there are mind games or whether it's meant to be literal, especially in Oxford, because like you get, I guess even going in, you have this preconception of, okay, this is academic rigor, like the institution TM. They're gonna want to like put me through my paces. Is this a trick? Which I don't think probably has happened that much, but it can get in heads for sure.
For sure. And one other thing actually I thought of is when being an older subject, classics don't tend to put any lectures online apart from some of the like art history stuff. And so I found that actually, surprise, the sections that I did better on in my exams were the ones that I'd been able to listen to the recordings of and write my own notes in my own time, and then like could actually process the information in my own time and knew it much better. So that was like a really interesting takeout for me. I think at the end when I got my results and stuff back was that those were the specific and they like stood out very much so. The ones where I'd actually been able to listen to those recordings in my own time, and how much these adjustments don't seem like much to other people perhaps, but to someone who's neurodivergent, they can mean like a world of difference.
Yeah.
I think the good news is nowadays, so Oxford opened the Schwartzman Centre for the Arts and Humanities start of Michaelmas term, so this October. And that I did a consultation about the tech in there. I believe it's all like Teams and lecture capture. I hope it's all recorded now, because I had the same issue with my faculty.
Yeah.
I can only hope. I have no confirmation, but I hope it exists.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
you would hope, given it's all just been built, and I'm sure with your help too. Like it's important, and
I put bricks down on the Schwartzman. They got Passive House accreditation today. It's the largest in Europe.
Oh, wow.
And the first Passive House concert hall, I believe.
Incredible.
Good going.
Yeah, really solid. I need to visit it. I've not been yet. Maybe I'll come and see you guys and...
Pop in
No,
for a
you
cup of
must.
tea.
Yeah, it's substantial.
Next question. I want Amelia to start with this one. Answer however you please. No is a complete sentence here. Have you experienced any instances of your disability, neurodivergence, proving helpful in a higher education setting?
Good question. Yes, in terms of back to kind of the idea of my thesis of what we were talking about before, definitely. Because I think what was really interesting was there's two aspects to, I think, that link to kind of my neurodiversity and it being a benefit. One was that I didn't have an idea the day before the meeting with my supervisor for the thesis, and I knew that I wanted to do it on the Aeneid, but I didn't know exactly what. And so Olly said to me, we were on a walk, and he said, right, you're going to sit down and read the book cover to cover this evening, while I cook, and you are going to find your idea. And my ability to hyperfocus and do just that meant that I found my idea within like an hour or whatever of reading the book. And so I'd say that was a definite benefit, was being able to hyperfocus, and throughout the process of doing the thesis, finding it as a special interest and hyperfocusing on it definitely helped. And I think also the idea that I came up with is probably, I would say, would be linked to the, like, as a benefit of my neurodiversity, in the sense that I wrote on gift giving in the Aeneid and looked at how gifts had been used as a narratological device to hide like foreboding events, essentially. And there are gifts littered throughout the entire book, and I could only pick a few. And Virgil, who wrote the Aeneid, had essentially used convention of gift giving, whether that was like on arrival between like a guest and a host, or whether that's between a father and a son and like kinship, or whether that was between lovers, like marriage. And he'd used these specific conventions to hide these laced gifts, which the characters often didn't know the lineage of, which had direct implications on that character then later on. For example, like a robe that Dido was given, which had a lineage of someone who'd killed themselves out of love, and then Dido then goes on in book 4 to kill herself because of her love for Aeneas. So there are a number of these laced gifts throughout, and the idea very much, I think, came from like seeing things very differently in the world as a neurodivergent person, and trying to like understand social interactions and like what was really happening and what are the layers going on. And I think that's what brought me to that idea of understanding like that this isn't all as it seems.
And was an original reading of the Aeneid.
Yeah.
Hence the prize.
That's so cool. Like, and I feel like the Aeneid's a very well-studied book as well. Like, it's one of those like quintessential classics texts.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
That's
like
over for hundreds of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Along comes Amelia's brilliant autistic mind and smashes it wide open. It's brilliant.
Anyway, so maybe I'll do more of that in the future, like as I go back to some higher education at some point.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the right place.
This is true. This is true.
All right, Olly, over to you. Have you experienced any instances of your disability proving helpful in higher education? We've kind of already touched on it, but if you have any other thoughts, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would say, I mean, it helped in higher education as in it helped me get through my undergraduate degree, but not at my best. Since coming back, I think it's more interesting doing the Masters and a DPhil. And I would say it's helped me in the way that I too have identified like an area of interest that hasn't been considered before, that is perhaps overlooked by others. A lot of it links to gesture and to body language and to performance. And I think that all links through to, you know, a neurodivergent lived experience and looking at and understanding other people's behaviors around you. And so I think my own lived experience has contributed to the things that I can see in art that perhaps others have overlooked, and the meaning and the cultural implications of it. And then also, I think when I write, now I've learnt the rules of the game, I think all I've ever really known is original thought. I've never paid any lip service to the well-trodden path academically, because again, I've never engaged with it in a meaningful way. And so although I've skipped over a pretty important step in anyone's like educational journey, I do find now that whenever I think and write, it tends to be things which haven't been considered. And so that leads to some really exciting sessions with my supervisors, because we're talking about new stuff. And that's a real treat, especially when you're looking at, again, similar to the Aeneid, I'm looking at Tudor portraits that, feature in every single A-level history textbook, Hans Holbein, Henry, hands on hips, but we're seeing it differently. And that's quite cool.
Mm-hmm. That's also, you're making the pilgrimage to Trinity College, Cambridge, with a giant Henry portrait. Just for the dining experience,
Yeah. It's got to be better than Kellogg. Or Christchurch. There's a Henry in Christchurch.
There is a Henry in Christchurch.
I think there's a Henry in a few. There's definitely one in Christchurch, given bounding link to Christchurch. But yeah, I am due a trip to Cambridge actually, because I've connected with an academic there who's also interested in the space that I'm exploring, and so it's exciting. Yeah,
that's very exciting. Go get lunch in Jesus. We have Queen Lizzie I.
Okay, well, I'm studying her too. So her long, elegant, pointy hands.
Yeah. Allegedly, the portrait in Jesus Hall is one of the few drawn from life, painted from life. That's the rumor I've heard from being at that college. So
okay, I'll just try and get myself into a formal Jesus. Great.
Yeah, they don't take card, unfortunately, for food. The last time I was there, so you couldn't sneak in, but. Find a fellow, you'll be fine.
Find a fellow, exactly.
So we're going to start transitioning to chat about your consultancy work now. Very quickly, are we okay to overrun a bit, because there's two of you, this episode's a bit longer?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So I've snuck a little comment in the questions here where we're going to start talking about the community stuff that you were building that I engaged with, and that's how we met. But for now, just answer with whatever. Were there any clubs, societies, or initiatives that made a significant positive difference to your experience of higher education?
Relating to neurodiversity or in general?
In general.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that. In St Andrews, it was clubs and societies that kept me kind of humming along. When I wasn't in lectures and when I wasn't reading books, I was involved in clubs and societies, and I was the busiest I've ever been in my life. I had a diary filled with meetings from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. I kid you not. I was absolutely slammed constantly, and I was across pretty much every club and society I could get involved with, from organising a student fashion show, the biggest student fashion show in the UK. I did that for 3 years. Organising summer balls, organised the rave in the quad, Scottish country dancing, officer training corps. I mean, you name it, I did it, and I loved it. I sat on the board of governors as an undergraduate at the university. I did every student representing thing I possibly could, and it was incredible, and I loved every second of it. And I think clubs and societies play such an important role for people who are neurodivergent. It gives you structure, it gives you focus, it gives you energy from others, it gives you social connections where you might struggle if you were to just walk into a pub and make friends. I mean, that's unfathomable to me. Yeah. And so yeah, I'm grateful to clubs and societies for the happiest days, I can imagine. Apart from when I met Amelia, that's happier. But so I think that's so important, regardless of the focus. And if anyone is listening that's starting their higher educational journey, as much as it might seem hard to go along to the first meeting of whatever the society is, most universities have a range of societies, and whatever it is you're into, you should find something that matches. And the hardest moment is when you first walk in the room, and it can only be hopefully but should only be positive thereafter, and you will connect with people. And as hard as that can be if you're neurodivergent, if there's any one moment to like kind of take a deep breath and jump in, it's at the start of term, and find your people and you won't look back.
Definitely agree with all of that. Yeah, I mean, I found more of a link like in sports, and I found that was through college sport, fortunately, and also I did fives. I quite like doing things I've never done before. So I joined the Ladies Eton Fives Club, having never done it before, because I think a friend said they were needing girls once, so I was like, oh, I'll just give it a go, and ended up sticking with it. And that, I would say, was a really good kind of way of, like you say, socializing, making friends. And
sport as medicine is an interesting thing for
helpful.
People who are neurodivergent. I mean, it depends on your neurotype, but I know that ADHD and sport are intrinsically linked as a source of dopamine, and all sorts of other positive reasons. And so sport in whatever form is certainly worth pursuing. Amelia's a little more talented than I am.
Not true.
Amelia, I feel like you're underplaying this. Like, I had a look at your profile. You have 2 half blues.
Yeah.
She's captain of the team and has 2 half blues, exactly right.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's that thing of feeling like, can I really say? I mean, I can, because I did do it, but equally it just feels like somehow I'm still like blagging it. But yeah, no, it was really fun, and I actually did that during my exams. I was kind of mad enough that during second year exams for classics, you do mods, which is like 11 exams in 10 days straight. And I had one weekend in the middle, and that's when the varsity fives match was. And I was like, I'm not going to miss this, even though I've got all these exams still next week. And I just thought, I'm just going to burn out if I try and do revision. Like, I either know it by now or I don't. So I was like, I'm going to go to the fives match. And we won. Hey. So it was worth going. So I came out after the exams, having done the 11 exams and with a half blue.
That is incredible. Oh my goodness. Yes, absolutely brag. It's not blag, it's brag. That's incredible. So one of the reasons I'm asking this question a little bit later in the podcast than usual, and the reason is that I met you guys at my Freshers' Fair in second year. I was coming in to do the stall on Tea Society, and there was a dude with this really cute dog stood outside. I was like, hey, can I pet your dog? I think that's how that started. And I was like, yeah, this is Nala. Yeah. Do you do are you neurodivergent? I was like, yeah. It's like, why don't you come? That was Olly with Nala, your guys' dog, who is the goodest girl.
I actually had a sign above my head saying neurodivergent or think you might be ?
Yes.
Yeah, and we were outside.
You didn't have a stall.
No, because we'd forgotten.
Because we hadn't booked one. We have ADHD.
Yeah. So we figured that everyone anyway would want to see us at the end, because once you've been through that, you need a bit of like relief. And Nala was definitely providing some therapy, so it kind of worked in the end.
Yeah. I still have the ADHD mug. I literally used it today.
Amazing.
I was going to use it for this recording, but I had hot chocolate earlier. Oh no. But the reason that I mention ADHD is that ended up, so in my second year, it was like this really cool student society. People meet up, do like Pomodoro, just chill out. Did some awesome like sensory evenings in Wadham College, I think it was. But that ended up turning into Neurohouse. And Neurohouse is a consultancy firm to help businesses design their experiences through a neurodivergent lens. And I just want to ask how that idea came about and a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, thank you. And so we still have the ADHD community. It's difficult to really run the community and the consultancy, and we try our best to do both. We were looking at whether or not we would extend the ADHD community across campuses across the country, and to kind of, but that would be a full-time job in itself. And so the kind of the area that we're growing from a business perspective is Neurohouse, the consultancy. That came about from a combination of our lived experience, but also professional experience. So my background, before I came back to university and concurrently, because my studies have always been part-time here, I had spent the last 15 or 20 years as a brand strategist, working for a number of different companies, starting at Procter & Gamble, which is a big kind of American corporate fast-moving consumer goods company that makes everything from Pantene shampoo to, the list of brands is endless. But toothpaste, shampoo, you name it, it's in your kitchen sink, under your kitchen sink. To working for Virgin, Richard Branson, doing the Virgin Master brand, working for advertising agencies as a brand strategist. And all of that time was spent, my specific role was as a strategist, as, understanding the consumer. And at no point working for any of those companies did we ever have a conversation about the fact that 1 in 5 people's brains are wired fundamentally differently. So when I got my late in life diagnosis, and then Amelia did, and we started to recognize how distinct our behaviors were and how many of us there are, we were thinking, like, how do brands not design for this? Like, we represent a huge amount of the population, and we deserve to enjoy experiences as much as anybody else does. But currently, experiences in life are designed for the neurotypical and not the neurodivergent. And that has implications on, like it or not, interactions with brands informs so much of your lived experience, from opening a bank account, going to buy a pair of trainers, going on holiday, not going on holiday because you can't think of anything worse than getting on an aeroplane or staying in a hotel, going out for dinner, or again, avoiding it. And the sad truth is that a lot of neurodivergent people either do these things, they have to hack them, so they have to go to the Westgate Centre for the last half an hour of the day because there are less humans, and they get shooed out by the angry staff because they want to close the shutters. That's what we do. A lot of neurodivergent families just avoid going on holiday altogether, and that's 87%
of autistic families don't go on holiday.
I did not know.
Don't take vacations.
Oh,
yeah. So like, we're talking about really important experiences which it could be designed for and should be designed for. And so what we do is we work with brands to say, look, this is an enormous community, and also don't just do this out of the goodness of your own heart. Like, we are a community that has agency and deserves choice and has spending power. And so, design your experiences for us
every day
and become a choice of ours. And if it makes commercial sense and it makes sense from a kind of a human perspective, brands, decent brands, really should engage in that way. And so that's why we set up what we set up. And, we have worked with some truly amazing partners, and it's been a really positive journey so far.
I think your 2 big clients have been Pandora and Versace. And
yes.
I've been watching, I follow your Instagram, and just seeing the stories of that is just awesome.
Thank you.
Because I remember you'd be we'd have an ADHD event, we're having some chat with a couple brands, we can't say anything. It's like, ooh. And then it ended up being 2 massive brands. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's been amazing. And
pretty wild ride.
What I will say is that we are absolutely determined to establish this space. We were very early movers. We were pioneers in this space. We were the first to look at the implications of neurodiversity on consumer behaviour and what brands can do about it. And we set up NeuroHealth a couple of years ago. And we have always been determined to establish this space with integrity, with academic rigour, and with kind of the respect for the neurodivergent community by the neurodivergent community, that it deserves. And the level to which we have felt seen and supported by the clients that we've worked with has been quite overwhelming, actually, so positive, and kind of would reinstill anybody's faith in, people often think of brands as being horrible, big juggernauts, money-making machines, but they're run by human beings, and if you find the right brand with the right humans, they can do an awful lot of good. And we can talk at length about how brands should be engaging with the neurodivergent community, and we certainly advocate for kind of truly inclusive design, and to never other anybody in the process, to never make anyone feel like they're standing out. And like any good design, it should be actually invisible. This isn't about press releases. This isn't about big signs that say neurodivergent people are welcome here.
Yeah.
There's nothing tactical. We're talking about truly inclusive design where if you design for the neurodivergent, those people can actually enjoy that experience. But at no point are you saying, hey, neurodivergent person, it's just, you'll just go and hopefully you'll find it,
you feel it's open and welcome.
Exactly right.
Well, one thing I will say, I am so glad that you are front runners in this. But it kind of reminds me of when I set up the show. I was like, oh my goodness, how did this not exist already? Like, it's wild to me that it was only a couple years ago and you guys are front runners in this. I'm glad you are, and I'm glad it's happening, but I'm always surprised that those kind of movements never started earlier.
Yeah, you're right, and
really good point.
And that's why we jumped when we did, and we did it, and we did it with the support of Oxford University actually, and they've also been incredible. So shout out to the innovation side of Oxford, who couldn't be more wonderful in their neuro inclusion and their general support.
Yeah, OUI.
Oxford University Innovation. Yeah. And the necessity to establish it with rigor has been met through the support with the university. And yes, we're glad to be front runners. We know what's coming. We know that at some point neuro washing will happen. We've dubbed that phrase and we're doing everything we can to avoid it.
Yeah.
Which will feel tactical and it will feel superficial and it will feel frustrating. And, for there to be any type of cultural movement, there'll be times that people get it right. There'll be times that people get it wrong. As a community, I think we're still developing in terms of how we even identify as a community, how we want to show up. I think it's just important that we speak for ourselves, but self-advocacy itself can be challenging. Yeah. And so, if there are any brands out there listening or anyone who works for a brand, what I'm not saying is come and speak to Neurohouse. This isn't a plug. But what I am saying is speak to the neurodivergent community before you do anything. Yeah. Because so often initiatives fall flat because that doesn't happen. And it's so important.
I will say go speak to Neurohouse. These guys are great. Even if you weren't, I will. Amelia, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I feel like you said it all. I can't actually think of anything more to say. You pretty covered everything.
The one thing I was just going to add, which I think is important, is that you obviously need to do more than even just speak to the neurodivergent community. Like it's a really complex space to go into, and the first step is talking to the neurodivergent community, and then the second step is kind of asking really, why are we doing this, and are we doing this in a way that is kind of meaningful and respectful, and back to that point of not othering.
Yeah.
Essential
for us.
Totally essential. I've experienced moments, and this fits in, I think, to the wider subject of your podcast and probably the primary area of interest for your listeners, which is like true inclusion doesn't other. And, if you're looking at kind of reasonable adjustments, for example, within higher education or creating an accessible and an inclusive environment, if you can do that in a way that feels dignified, and you can do that in a way that doesn't make the individual feel like they have to almost, sometimes you have to other yourself, which is like utterly mortifying, or be made to feel other by others. That's a bit of a mouthful, but you take my point. Yeah. And that question of inclusion, whether it's a brand or a university, thinking about ways that you can do that in a seamless and dignified way, I think is just so important.
Yeah. And I'm going to extend that, if you don't mind. I think it's not just looking at the customer experience. Make sure that things are neuro-affirming for your employees as well. Because if they're going to come out and tell you what's not accessible, not only might you save a bunch of money on consultants, but you might, find a lot of strengths in your workforce that you didn't realize you previously had.
Yeah, and I think that's a really key point, and something that we often talk to brands about is doing those two things in conjunction. It doesn't make any sense that you wouldn't look at your employee side as what at the same time as looking at your consumers.
Yeah.
And kind of those two things definitely go in tandem, and to make yourselves like really resilient as a business in terms of understanding a broader market and part of your the people you're talking to, but also the people who work for you, definitely.
And what we've loved about going and talking to brands has been that, we'll go and we'll do a town hall talk or whatever in the canteen for whichever brand, and we'll talk about neurodiversity as an introduction. And then the number of people that come up afterwards, and they're like, that's me. And, and then we just meet loads of, neurodivergent folk working for these different companies. And we can then ensure that initiatives are driven by the neurodivergent employees themselves again, and how we can support that is far more meaningful than like a top-down corporate thing. It's always better if it's driven by neurodivergent folk. But again, like to anyone who's listening that holds budgets or structures or planning or whatever it is, yes, having neurodivergent folk driving initiatives and speaking for themselves is essential, but it's also essential that you support those people. Those groups need funding, and they need support when it comes to whatever it might be, administration, and when it comes to like taking that thinking and plugging it into a bigger ecosystem within a university or within a brand. And so don't just hand it over to like the neurodivergent gang. Like, you got to support them along the way, and then you can get to some pretty good stuff.
Yeah,
I love that. It's just so, I'm so stoked seeing what you guys do, and then I always drop you a message. This is awesome, and seeing it expand has been amazing. And we've been chatting off the recording about the next plans. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen next. Are we ready for some rapid fires, guys?
Go for it.
Go for it. Right, Olly, this one's for you. Amelia, obviously you have finished your studies for now.
Yes.
Olly, however, you are both the CEO of Neurohouse and a part-time DPhil student, so you're doing your PhD. What's that been like for you?
Yeah, tough and blissful at the same time. So like running a consultancy, and obviously I run it with Amelia, but like taking the role of CEO, you're doing an awful lot of conversations and planning and structuring and things that I may not be particularly epic at, and the moment I can hire someone else to do that job will be absolutely amazing, and I can focus on the strategy. But in a good way, to be able to go and sit in the Duke Humphreys Library. For anyone who is listening that hasn't visited Oxford, that's kind of the inner sanctum of the old Bodleian Library, and it's so beautiful and calm, and it's not only is it romantic, it is literally where romantic poetry was written by the romantics themselves. It's utterly divine and sublime, and amidst the chaos of creating and running a business, to be able to set aside time to go and sit and breathe and read about literature and art and to write about it is sublime. The flip side of that is having Neurohouse, DPhil, plus dyslexia, ADHD. It's a hell of a combo, and it's tough. So yeah, there's no two ways about it. It can feel quite overwhelming, but no matter how tough it gets, I always come out.
It lights up your brain.
It lights up my brain, yeah. And I always come out and say, like, I've got to keep doing this because I love it.
Oh, I'm happy for you that it's going that way. Quick note on the Duke Humphreys, actually. It's recently been voted the 4th most beautiful library in the world.
Where are the other 3?
Yeah. It's the 1,000 libraries list. You'll need to find it. But ironically, I actually found studying there a bit inaccessible because I always wanted to study on the balcony. But they have these giant LED beams, and I would be blinded, so I couldn't study there. But
another spot that I really like, though, just to shout out to this one, is up in the little alcoves of the Taylorian.
Oh yeah, the reading room.
Yeah, the reading room, and then you go up the little staircase into your own alcove, so you don't have anyone else with you. And if you can nab it early in the morning, then
a lot of the neuro-inclusive design we do, so we do a lot of like designing physical spaces, physical retail spaces, and it's quite cool sharing, like, as design references to the brands that we work with. We will often share references of kind of libraries that we study in, and kind of what you can learn about creating spaces that feel calm, that calm the central nervous system and allow you to feel like you are somewhat cocooned from others around you. And so it's been quite fun to share pictures of whatever it is, the Radcliffe camera.
Yeah.
I love sitting outside the Radcliffe camera in the alcoves. That's my spot.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for a long time, I used the Radcliffe Science Library, opened in, I think it was like 2023, 2024. And they had a like well-being sensory room with like weighted blankets and Lego.
Oh.
Do you not know this?
No.
Weighted blankets, Lego, like fidgets. Wow. It did, like, it was originally, they'd have like quiet hours where they dim all the lights and turn on like bubble tubes and stuff. I think it got a little bit repossessed by people stress studying. And I think some of the fidgets might have disappeared.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is an incredible example of neuro-inclusive design. And when I got there, when it opened, when it was originally being used as like this kind of really cool break room where you could have a sensory break, incredible space. It's in the basement. Really, really recommend go checking out.
Okay, we'll check it out. Yeah. Thank you.
No worries. 2 more questions. Not long to go. So I've this is a question I normally ask on the podcast, but I've rephrased it because you both actively look at improving experience for neurodivergent people for a living. Obviously, this podcast focuses on higher education. You're very much B2B, but you're also both very involved. You know, it's Oxford Impact. And I was wondering if we were looking at higher education through the lens of what you do, how do you think we can improve higher education to be a more neuro-affirming experience?
Good question.
I've got lots of thoughts.
You got a lot.
Do you want to go?
You say some of yours, and I'm sure.
Can you rapid fire your lots of thoughts?
Yes, I can.
Jump in.
Absolutely. Mandatory training for all staff on the implications of neurodiversity on the student experience.
Yeah, you're not the first to say that, nor the last.
Like, it's a total no-brainer.
Building empathy in the training.
Yep.
It's not just an informative one, it's creating empathy so people understand what it actually feels like.
Yeah, we often simulate how it feels. So we'll do, like, for example, ADHD, how it feels to have ADHD, be ADHD. And that invokes empathy, what you can't read on a page.
Yep.
And a lot of people can't even begin to know what it feels like until you at least try to simulate it. That's one thing. Properly specific student support plans as opposed to generic ones. Professors needing to read the student support plans. There being some accountability if they don't.
Actually, putting them in an accessible format where they can as well, because I've had lecturers who I greatly respect who just couldn't read support plans because either there were too many of them or they were in an inaccessible place.
Yeah, and also those professors were possibly neurodivergent themselves.
Yeah. Could be.
Yeah, and so if the format itself isn't inclusive for the person reading it, and that's sort of another thing that we look at with NeuroHouse a lot of the time is not just how can managers manage people who are neurodivergent, what happens if the manager is themselves neurodivergent?
And how do you make that training tool accessible for them?
Yeah, so that's important. I would absolutely make sure that whichever student is starting at the university and if it is known that they are neurodivergent, that someone says to them, which someone said to me, which is incredibly helpful. I said, how am I going to get through a master's with ADHD, dyslexia? Wow, how does this work? And they were like, trust me, you've come to the right place. There's no shortage of people on the spectrum at this university. And that was amazing for me to hear because I was like, oh, like you sort of always feel like you're the only one. And then you realize that you're in good company.
Yeah.
And to let people know that they're in good company is super important. Yeah. However, that manifests itself in a kind of sensitive way. Those are mine. I'd have thought off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Amazing. Last question, guys. We have had an amazing discussion over what I am very happy is a slightly longer episode, I think about an hour. We have your stories start off very distinct, then obviously with NeuroHouse, they converge, and it's wonderful to see. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what your response is to this. We'll do it one at a time. I'll start with Amelia. If we were to take your entire story and condense it down, maybe into like a few sentences to a paragraph, what is one key takeaway that you would like listeners to remember from your story?
That is such a good question, but I'm also not very good at reducing things.
As close as you can. It's okay.
I would want people to remember, I think maybe two things. One, to have confidence in yourself and your abilities, and to trust yourself, because you're more capable than you think you are, and often your like original ideas will come out when you allow yourself to like trust yourself. So I'd say that is like a really key one. And what's the other one? I've forgotten. Classic ADHD.
Brag, not brag.
Match to Olly. Yeah, that. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, brag, not blag. Oh my god, it's the wrong way around.
Yeah, brag, not blag.
Brag, not blag.
Yeah, that's probably quite a good summation.
I like that one.
Yeah, I like that
not
one.
The other way around.
I had another one, but I can't remember exactly, so I'll have to.
We can come back
see if
to
it comes back to me in a second.
We can go to Olly first.
Okay, so what would I like people to remember about my story? I would like people to remember, or to take away from the story, perhaps,
Yeah.
that you, firstly, if you're on the journey to a neurodivergent diagnosis, I hope that what we have together managed to do is to go through that process and not tell ourselves, okay, this is the answer to everything, right? And I think to be pragmatic about where you can grieve the opportunities that you've missed, if it's late in life, but to be kinder to yourself for the opportunities ahead.
Yeah.
And I think that if I was to surmise one thing I feel like I've been able to do is to now be kinder to myself.
That was the other thing I was going to say.
Okay, so being kinder to yourself. And the other one is original thought again. And I don't, again, depends on who's listening and how they relate to the idea of original thought. I can only speak from my experience, and I think that often it is it's ADHD that's doing the talking when it comes to original thought. Dyslexia also often lauded for original thought. And
I'd say it's my autism. Well, I mean, it's a mix.
Well,
too,
again, because you look at questions differently.
Yeah.
And looking at things differently is a great skill. And if you're finding it tough at undergrad, trust me, it does get easier, because the further you go through your studies and you progress, although there's less structure, which is a challenge, there's more opportunity to express original thought. And neurodivergent minds have forever made the world a better place through their original thought.
It's a great point to make.
I think that's a good thing.
And you get to deep dive into special interests, which is just amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely.
Tutor hands and gift giving and
exactly. All that good
it's like
stuff.
eccentric, amazing. I want to just go look at. I like looking at stained glass personally. I have a few favourite stained glass spots in Oxford. Like I probably wouldn't study it, but it's finding that kind of niche, especially like little artsy niches.
Yeah, the right place for it.
So great.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm just gonna close the show, and then maybe we'll have a chat. We'll see. So,
sure.
HE Enabled is the show dedicated to sharing our experiences of disability, neurodivergence, and long-term health conditions in the UK higher education system. First of all, thank you for putting up with the rebrand, everyone who's listening. I hope that you can still find the episode this week. Thank you for staying with it. Second of all, just remind the show has a Patreon. It's only £1 a month, £12 a year. There'll be early episode releases definitely coming up this month and whenever I can. And I might post a couple of bloggy bits. We'll see. Should be good. But yeah, thank you so much. Cool. Olly and Amelia, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure.